Okay, now here is where it gets really interesting, because here we're introduced to Gatsby's backstory. Um, and we've got the narrator, Nick Carraway, talking about the vision that he had for his life with Daisy. So we're introduced to this idea of visualizing something in the future and then bringing it into life. So, we're introduced to we're introduced to Gatsby as James Gatz, who, was the son of very poor farmers who he didn't even consider to be his parents, because in his own imagination, he was the son of God. Okay. And this is where it's telling you that we're all children of God, not just the prophet, not just, Jesus, anybody who's familiar with the story of Christ. Jesus was the Son of God, and he came to tell us that we were all children of God. We're all manifestations of source consciousness. And not only, I'm just looking through my screenshot, sorry. Not only was he the Son of God, but he could imagine his own future. He has had visions of his own future as being much bigger and better than the situations that he found himself in as a child. So he kind of ran away and chased his destiny. And at that moment, where it's showing that he chased his destiny, along with scenes of kind of, the cosmos and the universe, we see his eye peeking through the hole. And, if I'm assuming whoever's watching this video, and if you've watched it this far, you're probably already quite researched in occult symbolism. If you're not, then I recommend, you go and do some research, as you're obviously clearly interested in this topic. Otherwise, you wouldn't be watching the video. But this, that, you see on magazine covers and music albums and stuff like that, and everybody says is kind of a symbol of the Illuminati and stuff like that. Yes, this is a symbol of the Illuminati meaning the illuminated ones, because this is the all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid. It's the third eye. It's the eye of Horus, that when you open it, you can actually see things from the higher perspective. You can see things through the eyes of God. So it's telling you you're a child of God, open your third eye, and you can manifest whatever vision you have for your future. And another thing that I found really interesting was when I kind of was talking to some friends on Facebook about, researching this video and making this video. One of my friends told me that F. Scott Fitzgerald was actually a Freemason, which doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, I'm not sure, how, what degree and everything, but, I'm definitely going to look into it more, and definitely going to read the book now, because there's definitely, how many times am I going to say definitely? It's interesting the way that Baz Luhrmann has used F. Scott Fitzgerald's original writing as part of Nick's narration, because there is so much that he's alluding to in those words. It's almost like he's using those words to to manifest things. It's like those words are affirmations, they're spells. And anybody who's done any research into phonetics and etymology will know that words are spells that bring things into manifestation. Okay, so now we fast forward to another one of Gatsby's infamous parties. And we've got this little bit where Gatsby and Tom Buchanan are kind of getting reacquainted and saying, oh yeah, we've met before and blah, blah, blah. And then that's when it's synchronistic, because they're remembering that they met in the den of morality with Wolfsheim, and where Wolfsheim was, telling Nick Carraway that, Gatsby is really trustworthy because he would never look at another man's wife. And it's at that moment, back at Gatsby's party, where Gatsby tells Tom Buchanan, see, I know your wife. And then Tom gives him that look where he knows what he's alluding to. And this is where Gatsby and Daisy obviously fall into the trap of kind of toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, because, they shouldn't really, even though Tom Buchanan is also having an extramarital affair, they shouldn't really be doing that themselves also. if they want their love to really be pure and not corrupted by these kind of outside immoral forces. Okay, so then we've got Daisy and Gatsby dancing together at the party, and then that's when Daisy asks Jay if all of this that he's dreamed up is really from his own imagination. So she's again alluding to his powers of manifestation, how, he's been able to visualize these things from, however young an age it was, and then bring them into physical manifestation. And then that's when he tells her that it's not only from his own imagination, it's also because she was right there with him. So again, that's alluding to what I was saying before, the idea of that twin flame union, that, the twins are never separated. They're always united in those higher realms, because essentially they are, just a split of the same, they're twin souls. So of course they're united in the higher realms. But also the idea that, in yearning for her, he's somehow psychically communicating with her, and he's kind of creating all the things that he thinks that she would want, because she still embodies a lot of these aspects of toxic femininity, where she likes these kind of big conspicuous displays of wealth and status and stuff like that. So he's done that to please her. Okay, now when we get to the scene outside by the pool, I think it is, where Gatsby is talking to Nick Carraway about what's going on with Daisy, we see again Gatsby falling into this whole toxic masculine, adopting these toxic masculine traits, like where he's kind of he's saying it's so hard to make her understand, and Nick's just kind of looking at him like don't ask her for too much, because Gatsby is not. He's talking about how when he first kissed Daisy, he felt married to her, but he's still having this idea that to love somebody is to control and to possess them, and ultimately that's what ends up leading to his downfall and the demise of his relationship with Daisy, because he insists on her later on telling Tom Buchanan that she never loved him, when if he was actually in alignment with the true embodiment of the twin flame union that they that I'm presuming that they share, that you cannot possess your twin. And if you really love your twin and you love them unconditionally, then you have to be able to let them go on their journey when they are apart from you. So if that means having another relationship with another person, then you have to let them go and you have to wish them well. Then that she was not unfaithful to Jay Gatsby by being in the relationship with Tom Buchanan and actually being in love with Tom Buchanan as well. Because ultimately, if you have unconditional love for your twin, then you should love the fact that they love another person and they'll come back to you when they're ready. And this is something that Jay Gatsby doesn't understand. And that's why Daisy ends up pulling away from him because of this. What else? Yeah, so it's so hard to make her understand. And this is kind of where Nick tries to say to him, look, she's been with somebody else. You can't go back and repeat the past. And this bit's interesting because this is where Gatsby says, of course you can. And he's so sure. He says it twice in one go. He says, of course you can. Of course you can. And he's telling you something there about the nature of time and timelines. And this is really interesting for me, and I've been researching this a little bit, but I'm not an expert in it. So, don't kind of quote me on these things. But if you want to know more about this, then firstly, if you're not familiar with the Mandela effect, then acquaint yourself with it now, because it's a very interesting scientific phenomenon. But there's also another lady that I found on YouTube. Okay, so look up the work of Cynthia Sue Larson. She is a physicist, a quantum physicist, and she has been researching the nature of time, the Mandela effect, quantum jumps, parallel universes, and things like that. So she's not just looking at, and there are other people also, other quantum physicists and other scientists who are looking at the nature of reality and multiverses and these ideas of like multiple timelines and parallel universes. So, I've always been aware of this kind of, idea in quantum physics that there do exist multiple different parallel universes, and you can sometimes, just by changing your vibration, you can sometimes you're always shifting anyway, and by changing your thought patterns and your vibration, you can consciously try and shift into an alternate timeline where you experience maybe a better outcome. But it's only recently that I've come into, and it's actually since watching this film, that I then started researching this more. And maybe I'll make some videos about it in the future when I become much more familiar with the principles. But the idea that you can actually go and change the past, because the past is that time is not, it's not a linear construct. We experience it as linear because we're three-dimensional beings. But if we were 5 or 6 or 7-dimensional beings, we would experience time in the same way that we experience the third dimension of space. A 2-dimensional being, so imagine a 2-dimensional being is like a pipe cleaner. It experiences the third dimension as you roll it across a desk as if it were linear. It doesn't understand the nature of space, just like we cannot possibly perceive the fourth dimension. We can't imagine actually what a hypercube looks like. We can see what the shadow of a hypercube looks like, but we can't possibly perceive what that, not in where we are now. Like maybe if we kind of, take plant spirit medicines and go into a shaman realm, we can imagine what 4D space looks like. And I have seen it during my ayahuasca ceremonies, which you can know more about if you watch that video. But you can actually see around objects and even inside them. It's very, very freaky, but we can't perceive that right now. So we perceive time as being linear, but it's not linear. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to go and move through time as if it were a space, as almost in the same way that we move through space. So yeah, it's very interesting. And I think the whole concept in trauma recovery that talks about inner child work, where, through either through meditation or hypnosis, you can go back and revisit certain traumas and you can play out a different scenario in your head. What that does is it actually changes, it can over time change your memory of the event and stop it from affecting your life now. Now, how this works, people don't really fully understand, but could it possibly be that we're actually changing our past and we're actually experiencing a whole new timeline, because the past that we had originally experienced is now in a different universe. It's a different parallel universe from the one that we're now existing in. I don't know. Like I'm still just researching it, but I find it very interesting, and I'm definitely going to do some more research into it. But Jay Gatsby is so fixated on this idea that you can repeat the past and you can change the past, that he even says it when he departs the scene. And he turns back to Nick Carraway and he says, "You're wrong about the past." Okay, so in this scene, again, we've got Nick Carraway, through the words of F. Scott Fitzgerald, repeating this idea of Gatsby having this vision of his future with Daisy. Not just a vision of his future with Daisy, but a grand vision of himself. So when at the time that he falls in love with Daisy, he's not where he wants to be. He hasn't manifested this newer identity for himself that he feels is worthy of this, this girl who's of higher class and status to himself. So he needs to bring those things into manifestation first. But he feels like if he kisses her and he falls in love with her, it's going to change his timeline and he's going to get stuck in a timeline in which he will not be worthy of her. And the words that F. Scott Fitzgerald uses to express this is saying that if he allows himself to fall in love with Daisy, he knew that his mind would never again be free to romp like the mind of God. So he wouldn't be able to, if he stays with Daisy, he won't be able to manifest the things that he needs to in order to be worthy of her, in order to be the man that she wants him to be, or that her family even wants her to be with a certain kind of man who has a certain amount of wealth and status. And again, it kind of feeds into this idea that I was talking about before, where the yearning and the longing for something that you don't have is what motivates you to bring certain things into manifestation so that you can then have them. Because if he has a Daisy in his life, then he won't feel like he has to do these things to become worthy of her. I mean, whether that's right or wrong, is up for debate. But that was his viewpoint at the time, that he kind of needs to go away for a time and become, somebody of wealth and status. And also in the scene where, they're kind of making love for the first time, it talks about how Daisy blossoms for him like a flower, which again is a reference to the sacred feminine, the primary feminine principle of care, which is the Vesica Pisces, which is which you see in the external genitalia of the female, the vulva, which I talked about in my video, Sacred Sexuality, which you can see. But yeah, also, that the Vesica Pisces then becomes the seed of life, which becomes the flower of life. So this idea, and it's always been, these references and parallels have always been made between female sexuality and flowers. And it is because of this idea of sacred geometry and the symbolism that is represented by the sacred geometry and the parallels that makes between, female sexuality as the source of all creation. Okay, now in this scene where we see the relationship between Daisy and Gatsby deteriorate, which is where he kind of insists on her confession to Tom Buchanan that she never loved him, which of course we know isn't true, and it's just, him operating out of, his insecurities and his desire to possess her and possess her past as well. We see him lose it after Tom Buchanan decides to humiliate Gatsby by, insinuating that he's not one of them. He's basically, he kind of attacks Gatsby's class origins and also his ethnic origins by saying, it's in our blood that, we're people like this and you're people like that. And, if you've researched the, even though he's played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and in the film he seems to be, just white European, throughout the book, the actual F. Scott Fitzgerald book, Gatsby has ambiguous ethnic origins. People aren't quite sure where he's from. And this was at a time in America where, people were quite xenophobic. If you weren't, Western European settler, then you were other. And, Gatsby seems to have some slightly ambiguous, possibly Eastern European, possibly Jewish origins. And hangs out with Wolfsheim, who's the Amitabh Bachchan character, who in the book is actually a Jewish character. So, Tom Buchanan's basically attacked him and kind of, made him feel small, and he's lost his shit, basically. He lost his temper. And in that moment, that's when Nick Carraway observes that Gatsby looked in that moment as if he'd killed a man, because he has violated, Gatsby realizes in that moment that he's violated his own moral principles, because he's attempting to be this divine masculine character, who's trying to win the love of the sacred feminine Daisy, who herself embodies a lot of toxic feminine, which is, ultimately why their relationship doesn't end up working out. Yeah, he realizes in that moment that he's violated the moral standards that he has for himself. And and kind of caused Daisy to have second thoughts. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about this, this symbol that keeps on showing up that Gatsby has on his ring, which I originally referred to as a mandala. And now it is structured like a mandala, which is kind of basically, has 8 sides. And it's kind of like a lotus flower almost. And what it symbolizes is the 8 directions of the universe. So if he's channeling universal energy to manifest all these things so that he can be reunited with his divine feminine counterpart, then the symbolism of the mandala does kind of have some kind of weight. But looking at it more, I feel like, even though it does fall in the definition of a mandala, I think it's actually a sun, because it's got the rays of the sun. So, and I might have to revisit this because I'm not 100% sure of exactly what this symbol is alluding to, but it could be something to do with, the sun is symbolic of the divine male child. So you've got the divine masculine, the divine feminine, goddess, and the divine god creator. And together they come into sacred union to provide the divine male child, which is right action in the world. So you've got the father, the son, which is the sun, the male child, but also the sun in astrotheology. And the Egyptians had the sun god as Horus. Other traditions refer to the sun god as Ra. And the sun god is masculine and the moon is feminine. So, there's some sort of, divine masculine, divine feminine symbolism playing out there. Especially because as the film kind of comes to a crescendo, we start to see the symbol more and more. We see it, it's all over the floors in Gatsby's house. It's, in the courtyard. And then we see it a lot in the swimming pool during, the climactic scene where Gatsby is shot by Myrtle's husband. So, I do feel like there is some kind of symbolic reference with the sun going on there, but I'm not 100% sure of exactly what it means. So, I invite other people to share their thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. My interpretation could be that it's referring to, and it's a reminder to Gatsby to follow the path of the sun, which is the sun, the savior of the world, Horus, Jesus. The divine male child is about right action, right and moral action in the world, which is hence why, Gatsby looks like he's killed a man when he loses his temper and, violates the principle, the sacred feminine principle of non-aggression. And it's okay to, there is the divine masculine principle of self-defense, and some could argue that because Tom Buchanan had been classist and racist towards him, that it's self-defense, but it isn't, because he didn't act out aggressively towards Gatsby. Gatsby acted out aggressively towards Tom Buchanan. So, he didn't follow right and moral action in the world. And that's what ultimately led to his downfall. Okay, now we see towards the end of the film, Nick Carraway becomes very disillusioned with New York in particular, but also humanity in general, after he sees that, after Gatsby was killed, that all the hundreds and thousands of people who enjoyed his hospitality at his parties, not a single person came to his funeral, not even Daisy, who just retreated back into her sort of toxic marriage. And, he says, New York was haunted for me. My once golden shimmering mirage now made me sick. Because he's now woken up to the fact that most of humanity is socially conditioned by these things like wealth and status, and they didn't really see the real Gatsby and what he was really motivated by. He revisits his house and he kind of says, when we first all met Gatsby, how We all wondered who he was, how we had all guessed at his corruption while he stood before us, concealing an incorruptible dream. And what he means by this is the fact that even though Gatsby has kind of, acquired his wealth by some slightly dubious and illegal means, everything that he's done has been motivated by love. And more than just love, like romantic love, as I talked about before, but as humans, our search and our obsession and our yearning for romantic love is actually, part of our journey back to source consciousness, because in this world of polarity, where source consciousness kind of splits and manifests in all these, 3D incarnations, everything in this universe, and a lot of indigenous cultures believe that everything in the universe, and language will also tell you this as well, certain languages are very gendered. They have, even inanimate objects will have feminine and masculine pronouns. Everything is split into masculine and feminine energy. So it's part of wanting to reunite with the polarity of the energy, the opposite of the energy that you are. If you're feminine, you'll want to reunite with something that is, embodies the masculine. And if you're masculine, you will be, driven to unite with the feminine. That is our search for unity. It's we're wanting to reconnect with ourselves. And when we're motivated by that, that is an incorruptible dream, as F. Scott Fitzgerald describes it. Okay, so the final scene is, so beautiful. This quote where he talks about, how he's yearning for Daisy, and he manifests all these things that he thinks will help him get there, with all the parties and the house and the wealth and the status and all of that. And he says he had come such a long way, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. But he did not know that it was already behind him. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms further, and one fine morning. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Such a beautiful paragraph, but what does it mean? What does it really mean? The way I see it, the way I've interpreted it, is that, and from what I understand about manifestation, just through my own experiences with the things that I've manifested, manifestation is very easy when you're not so attached to the outcome. So acquiring the house and the wealth and all of those things, even though they were the things that were going to lead him back to Daisy, he didn't really care about those things. So they were easy for him to manifest. But Daisy, on the other hand, his longing and his constant yearning and his not being able to accept that Daisy was already his and was always his, despite the fact that she was in another relationship and loved somebody else, him not willing to accept that as her having always been his is what ultimately led for her to slip away from him. Because when you have too much attachment to the outcome, and this is the thing with manifestation, because it seems like, even though I said before it's that yearning that keeps us motivated, it is, but that's why, like, manifestation is simple, but it's not easy, because it's a very difficult thing to do when you really, really desperately want something, and the lack of having that thing in your life is the overriding feeling, because you'll never be able to manifest it then. I mean, I know from personal experience and from also talking to other people that a really, really key way to manifest something that you really want to achieve in your life is not just to let go of attachment, but a really effective way of being able to let go of the attachment and just accepting, oh yeah, it's coming, like it's on its way, is when you visualize that thing that you're trying to manifest, visualize it as if it were a memory, as if it were in the past. Because then you've already had it and you've already experienced it and you don't feel the lack of it. And I think that's what he's alluding to in paragraph. But I invite you to give me your own interpretations, because, I feel like there's a lot of almost doublespeak in his language. And I'm definitely going to read the book. Didn't read it before. I was just so kind of enchanted by the symbolism in the film that I kind of wanted to talk about more about that. I don't know if Baz Luhrmann is also, into this kind of symbolism, or if he's into Freemasonry or anything like that. But I'd be interested to find out. But yeah, that's kind of my interpretations of the film, just based on my own research of occult symbolism, and researching kind of sacred geometry and, these kind of like hidden symbols and, hidden knowledge and things like that. So I think when you start researching things from that perspective, you start to see those signs and symbols everywhere, because there are people who are initiated into this knowledge, and they are putting the symbols in things. Whether people believe that or not is, I'm not really concerned about that, because this information isn't for everybody. It shouldn't be getting into the wrong hands. It shouldn't, and I'm quite okay with people disagreeing on my interpretations of this and telling me that it's all nonsense and mumbo jumbo, because if you're at base consciousness, you're not going to be able to understand this information, and you shouldn't be able to understand this information, because you're not going to use it for good means. You're going to use it for selfish and personal gain, and that's been happening far too much. So I think we do need to be careful with some of this stuff. Having said that, I'm quite okay putting this on YouTube, because I know that this is quite a long video and not everybody is going to get through it. So if you did get through it, then well done. And feel free to share your own thoughts and interpretations in the comment box below. I'm probably going to divide this video into like 2 or 3 parts, just to make it easier for people to digest. But yeah, like I said, it's not for everybody, and I'm totally okay with that. So yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to share it with people who are ready to hear it, then please do. If you have any suggestions for other videos that you want to see from me, then feel free to share them in the comment box below. And thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. I've seen the